Welcome back to Combat Mission Red Thunder for the other half of this year's Winter Turn by Turn. Halloween and I have played a mirror battle, so while I was attacking Pavlov's house as the Germans, we were playing another game at the same time where I was defending it as the Soviets. If you've seen Rattenkrieg, then you know how my attack went down, and it should be really interesting to see Halloween do a much better job. At the same time, because there were loads of names left over from the Adopt a Pixel Trapping initiative this year, I went through and renamed all the Soviet squads too. So more people got in, but remember, the survival of your adoptee is by no means guaranteed. To quickly recap the setup here, we are fighting an assault type quick battle on a chunk of the excellent Stalingrad Central Master Map that goes along with Nigel P and Umlaut's Stalingrad mod, link in the description. There is one objective, Pavlov's house, this 5-story apartment building on the edge of the 9th of January square, and it is worth 750 of the 1000 victory points on the table. So whoever has exclusive control of this building at the end of the game is going to win. So how do I want to defend Pavlov's house? The Soviets' biggest defensive asset here is the terrain. Looking north to the front and right of Pavlov's house, we have the 9th of January square, which is a great big chunk of open ground that any attack has to cross. It's not perfectly flat, the ground does offer some cover here and there, but it is overlooked on 3 sides by the Voyantov corner, Zab's house, Pavlov's house, the mill, and the workers' housing on the far right. All of these buildings are in the defender's setup zone, and that is a lot of windows for the attacker to cover. On the other hand, however, the square is also overlooked by a row of buildings immediately to its north in the German deployment zone, and these offer a solid position for a base of fire to support an attack across the square. This is an attack that can actually benefit from all that open ground by moving faster and not getting bogged down in clearing buildings like it might on other axes. Off to the left of Pavlov's, the terrain is more built up. There are more buildings and more opportunities for close-range ambushes by the defender, but, somewhat counterintuitively, that also means there's more cover for the attacker moving forward. Attacking here wouldn't take the Germans directly to the objective in the same way as an attack across the open square, but securing this flank and getting troops into Zab's house in particular would provide a good support by fire position to help tackle Pavlov's house and allow the Germans to interdict Soviet reinforcements trying to get into the building. Further back into defence, the large waterworks and power plant buildings on the left and the Penenskaya workshops and the mill on the right behind Pavlov's are relatively safe areas masked off from starting German positions, so these are good locations to hold reserves and positions in depth. The basic outline of my plan then is to hold on to Pavlov's house for as long as possible. Going into this, my sense is that this is going to be an infantry-centric attritional fight where both forces are going to get relentlessly ground down. So I need a force to hold the building, I need a force behind it to feed in reinforcements as the defenders on the objective inevitably suffer casualties, and I need another force on my left to contest that approach, maintaining a grip on Zab's house in order to keep that reinforcement route open. Jamming this concept into the force selector and managing the limited budget, I end up with a reinforced 43 type rifle company. In Pavlov's house itself, we have the company's first, or submachine gun platoon, under Salty Sea Snack. Salty Sea Snack is set up in the back of the objective. 4th Squad under Ivan Obelovich is up front, with Imanikas's 3rd Squad in between them. These are all on the ground floor, where the rubble piled up against the sides of the buildings should offer them a bit of cover. Higher up in the building is Attrition with 1st Platoon's sniper pair, where they can see out over the 9th January square and the right flank. I don't want to put too many men into Pavlov's house itself because it's obviously going to get a lot of attention, so the rest of the 1st Platoon, Colonel Oddball's 1st Squad and Unreal Assassin's 2nd Squad, are starting up in the workshops along Penenskaya, behind Pavlov's, where they can provide flanking fire down the side of the objective building, or feed into it across the ruined street as required. On the other side of the road, on the left flank, is 3rd Platoon. Occupying Zab's house, we have 2nd Squad under Nicholas McGoey, This is a standard platoon, so all the squads are armed with a couple of SMGs, a DP-27 light machine gun, and a lot of Mosin Nagant bolt-action rifles. Also in Zab's house, higher up, is La Ronche, leading one of the company anti-tank rifle teams. These are armed with a single PTRD 14.5mm anti-tank rifle, which can poke holes in light vehicles like armoured cars or half-tracks if any of those turn up, and hopefully inflict some subsistent damage on German tanks. In the block left of Zab's house is the rest of 3rd Platoon. Stormblock's 4th Squad up front opposite the Voyentorg, then 1st Squad under the Flying Fish, 3rd Squad under Grinch, and the platoon commander Dob 7343 in one of the U-shaped buildings. Rounding out 3rd Platoon is the platoon sniper pair led by Mimir, who is set up forward in the Voyentorg. The company's remaining platoon, 2nd Platoon, is standing by in reserve at the back of the waterworks. Leading the platoon is Jedrzej Duda, 1st Squad is led by Petra von Weber, 2nd by Oliver Croson, 3rd by T.S. Birkby, and 4th by It's Shikitai. The platoon sniper pair is commanded by Bengt III and is on the other side of the waterworks watching the Azovskaya road on the far left. Also set up in the waterworks, in the front right corner, is the company commander Werner Zusch, and on the corner of the power plant behind we have the company Maxim gun under Dominion OK No. From here, the Maxim can cover the left side of Pavlov's and has a keyhole onto the gap out in front between Pavlov's house and the chapel. Further back on the left, behind the power plant, is Visceral History with the battalion headquarters, and 2nd Convex with an early 1942 type T-34 in reserve. This is probably the worst T-34 in Red Thunder. It's still got the old turret with no cupola, where the commander doubles up as the gunner, but it carries plenty of ammunition, including some canister rounds, and is probably more competitive against the earlier war German tanks than I really give it credit for. From this position in the rear, I can hopefully send it out to where it's needed. Also in the back left is a 3-tube platoon of 82mm mortars from the battalion's mortar battery. The battery commander is Pushisti, the platoon commander is Adam Kavanagh, and the mortar teams are led by Oogly Boogly, Comrade Busterton, and Hans Liebendorf, respectively. Over on the other flank, most of the rest of my force is in the mill, acting as a further reserve to feed the objective. I wanted more submachine guns for this, so I included the 1st Platoon of the battalion's 2nd Company. The company commander is AWACS Ghost Eye, the platoon leader is Coffee Without Sugar with Hiking, and the individual squads are led by Kong, the Maritimes 99, Mr. Bass Games, and Duck 121. The sniper team is up high again, on the left side of the mill, where it can provide some early warning, and is led by Jacob Parsley. Sharing the mill with this platoon is the rest of the anti-tank platoon, Dumont, the platoon leader, Dogi covering the square, and Thang out back in reserve. Finally, for the troops, the 2nd Company Maxim gun under RF 8640 made it in and is set up on the far right, ready to put fire down across the 9th of January square. I did have some points left over at this stage and spent them on fortifications. Most importantly, I put a target reference point in front of Pavlov's house to make it easier to call in the mortars with those atrocious Soviet communication times, then wired off an angle extending from the chapel to force any attackers to go round into the open, and mined up the right flank of the building. Why I didn't put mines in front of Pavlov's house in the most obvious avenue of approach, I can't remember. With the force laid out, there is one thing that I've missed. Because this is an assault battle, the attacker gets some pre-battle intelligence, showing the general location of some unidentified units in the defence. I didn't get this in my attack because of the order in which we sent the files. Halloween hadn't deployed his defence when I did my first turn orders, so there wasn't anything to see. Halloween does get the benefit though, and on the first turn, my mortars out in the open get a message from the enemy mortars. Comrade Busterton and his mortar team are all but wiped out. Hans Liebendorf is also killed, but enough of his men survive to keep their weapon in action. Not a great start, and a pretty solid reminder of a basic lesson to stay under cover for as long as possible. My mortars have one job in my plan: to dump my explosive bombs on the immediate edge of the objective. With no way that Halloween was going to be reaching that objective on turn 1, I had no reason to have my mortars set up out in the open where they could get counter-batteried. Halloween also kicks off the first turn with some area fire. He has 3 Panzer IVs firing through gaps in the buildings across the square, and they pump high explosive shells into the mill. Again, this is a position revealed by pre-battle intelligence. Unlike the mortar experience though, the Maritimes Kong and Coffee Without Sugar are pretty safe on the ground floor out of direct line of sight, and Jacob Parsley's sniper pair is a tough target to hit when they're keeping their heads down. So I've gotten away with this one, and conceptualizing the battle as an attritional grind, I'm actually fairly happy to see the enemy use precious limited ammunition to minor effect. In a similar vein, I have basically elected to receive for the battle's opening stages. Halloween sends scouts through the post office and then towards the Voyentorg on my left, out into the square towards the chapel in the centre, and down through the housing on the far right. I decline to engage any of these, keeping my troops hidden with short target arcs. I don't want to reveal my positions to Halloween's tanks. I want to wait until the last moment and hopefully catch as many enemy soldiers as possible inside the kill zones to inflict maximum casualties. Those Panzer IVs are, however, a serious problem because I have a very limited anti-tank capability. The T-34 is probably capable, but somewhat blind and a single piece of hardware that I can't afford to lose. The anti-tank rifle teams are not going to achieve much against the Panzer IV, especially when they unavoidably have the later war side skirts as added protection. Coming into the battle, I was almost entirely focused on the infantry fight. That's obviously important. After all, it's infantry that are going to have to fight over Pavlov's house. But tanks are incredible enablers in these circumstances, and one of the key differences between this battle and Rattenkrieg is that Halloween's defence had a much stronger anti-tank component to it. That dictated a very different direction for the battle and caused me no end of problems. Every defence should really be first and foremost an anti-tank defence. This is especially true in the World War II period, where anti-tank assets are, by technological necessity, much more specialised. There's nothing to be done about it now though, I just have to take the pain. By the 5-minute mark, the German scouts are much closer, and I'm going to have to start dealing with them before they stumble on my positions and reveal them anyway. On the left, they've reached the Voyentorg corner building, occupied by Mimir's sniper pair with a likely support by fire position backing them up from the post office. In the centre, under covering fire from the tanks, the first scouts have entered the chapel and more German infantry is starting to follow them up. Most concerning though are the scouts on the right. I don't have anything over here except RF-8640's Maxim team and their ammo bearers, which has allowed Halloween to push all the way down to and across Pentonskaya Street without encountering any resistance. This has let him know already that he has a secure flank for any attack across the square, and that's going to allow him to better concentrate his supporting fires. Had I even a lone scout team further forward over there to act as a tripwire, I could have deterred or neutralised his scouts, maintaining Halloween's uncertainty about that flank, or at least forcing him to divert more troops to roll back my screen. As it is though, the scouts dodged some fire from Attrition's sniper pair in the top of Pavlov's, who draw some fire in return, and I have to send out RF-8640's ammo bearer team to try and deal with them. That's a fight between 2 pairs of soldiers with bolt-action rifles, and I eventually prevail with loss, but by then everything else has kicked off and the scouts are the least of my problems. Halloween's pre-planned artillery starts to fall at the 5-minute mark. A pair of 120mm mortars dropping a harassing mission down the length of Zab's house, and a smoke mission from a 4-gun battery of 105mm howitzers spread between Pavlov's house and the post office. With the wind blowing gently from the northeast, the smoke will drift towards Zab's house, swamping and blinding everything I have on that flank. That leaves Pavlov's itself, the workshops on Pentonskaya and the mill unobscured, but along with the Panzer IVs, Halloween has spread a total of 6 heavy machine gun teams across the houses overlooking the square, and these open up to keep my defenders' heads down. Attrition is killed in the opening barrage by a 75mm HE shell, and Mimir over in the Voyentorg gets into a fight with encroaching German scouts and loses his number 2. It's important that Mimir holds up the advancing enemy for a little while at least, as Stormblock's squad in the building behind opens up on German infantry crossing the square. With this oblique angle, they're able to put the hurt out, inflicting serious casualties on 2 German squads moving up to the chapel, forcing one to go to ground and the other to fall back, before one of the overwatching HMG teams can suppress them. That's the kind of engagement I want, but the smoke is going to put a stop to it, and with the overwhelming firepower of the Panzer IVs and machine guns able to concentrate on the mill and workshops, the defenders in Pavlov's house itself are pretty much on their own. The first German scouts move up, pause at the ruined entrance to the objective building, and then move in. Waiting for them in the second block, where they're far less exposed to enemy fire from the front, are the 9 automatic weapons of Ivan Obelevich's SMG squad. The scouts are quickly cut down, but the cat is out of the bag. With 1 Panzer IV moving up level with the chapel and the other 2 remaining further wide for now, Ivan Obelevich's squad is subjected to 75mm high explosive shells pounding both sides of their block, and within a minute they're reduced to 2 panicking soldiers. The smoke quickly builds, and soon Halloween's attacking squads pushing towards Pavlov's via the chapel are totally obscured from Zav's house and my left flank. As I wait for my mortars to come in to try and block that avenue of attack, the only problem the Germans have is desultory Maxim fire from RF-8640 aimed at the chapel. In short order, several enemy teams have made it across and established a foothold in the first block of Pavlov's house. Ivan Obelevich is unceremoniously mopped up as he cowers amongst the bodies of his men, but we're really just getting started here. While Imanikas's SMG squad moves up through Pavlov's to mount a frontal counterattack, I take advantage of all the smoke. Nicholas Mgoe leaves his LMG and some riflemen in their position in Zab's house and leads an assault team across the street to hit the German foothold in the flank. Plunging in with SMG fire and hand grenades, Mgoe's team creates a moment of utter chaos and confusion that Imanikas's squad ruthlessly exploits with a blistering hail of SMG fire. The Germans pull out with heavy casualties, all but wiping out Mgoe's squad on their way. Nicholas Mgoe himself makes it through, but only survives for another few seconds. One of the Panzer IVs has driven right up to the building and machine guns him through the hole in the front. It's only a brief respite. More German troops are entering the square, the Panzer IVs are close in and hammering the building, and the pervasive supporting fire is taking its toll. Jacob Parsley is killed in his sniper perch up in the mill as he tries to engage enemy infantry, and RF-8640's Maxim is knocked out by another one. I'm able to push Colonel Oddball's squad across from the workshops into Pavlov's and stack up Unreal Assassin's squad to follow them when necessary, but as long as Halloween's tanks can pummel everything with impunity, my infantry is really just meat for the grinder. The only asset I have to deal with those Panzer IVs is 2nd Convex's T-34. I moved this over to the right flank behind the mill early on, exploiting the hull down advantage offered by the road at the back of the map. Peeking the T-34 out from a defilade position behind a building earns a burst of coax fire from a Panzer IV, which very luckily prompts 2nd Convex to button up just before the tank is hit by an AP shell. The round strikes the weapon mount and fails to penetrate. I wasn't actually expecting to be able to survive hits. I suppose I'm far more used to Sherman armour versus Panther guns, and with this basic revelation I'm suddenly a lot more confident about putting 2nd Convex in harm's way. I decide to go after the Panzers. Shifting the T-34 right onto Tamboskaya, I move up to peek from behind a wall, still hull down on the road. Halloween has smoked up the workshops and blocked my view of the square, and I'm hoping I can get some flanking fire into the tanks pummeling Pavlovs around the edge of this new smokescreen. Instead, 2nd Convex almost immediately finds a Panzer IV waiting for him. Halloween has moved it up on top of a mound in the square, pointing directly at the T-34's previous position, and it's made the first spot. The Panzer IV gets the first shot off then, but it glances off the front of the hexagonal T-34 turret. 2nd Convex's first shot also ricochets off, but it hit with enough force to cause spalling between the driver and radio operator. There's a pause as the T-34 reloads, but the Panzer crew have obviously had enough. They're already bailing out as a second 76mm AP shell inflicts more spalling. A few more shots in the next turn, and the Panzer IV brews up. 1 down, 2 to go. My mortars are also starting to come in, but with all the smoke I have no idea what effect they're having. The SMG squads in Pavlov's are still getting hammered, Imanikas's squad up front has already taken a few casualties from HE shells, but immediately after 2nd Convex took out the Panzer IV, Imanikas himself is killed by another, and before the turn is out, the second block of Pavlov's house collapses under the persistent fire. The remaining 6 members of Imanikas' squad are crushed by the falling rubble. As the smoke in front of the Penninskaya workshop clears, my troops spot German infantry moving in to attack Pavlov's house from the side. Between them, Kong and Unreal Assassin's SMG squads put the fire out on one squad that takes casualties before falling back, but another one is already approaching the objective building. They run into the minefield. I can't be sure if some of them made it into Pavlov's, but if they do, they pull out almost immediately, losing more men to the mines and some SMG fire from Unreal Assassin's squad. As an unexpected bonus, Halloween has moved one of his Panzer IVs right up to the building. There's a chunk of ground there that could offer some cover from the T-34. The tank enters the minefield and sets off enough anti-personnel mines to damage the tracks and then immobilize it. That's good, but it's still up and running, and the fact that Halloween moved it up so close to the building must mean he's re-established an infantry foothold there. Meanwhile, across the street, there is the impending threat from the Voyentorg corner, of greater significance now that the combination of T-34 and mines has made the right flank considerably less palatable. Attempting to exploit the smoke again and repeat Nicholas McGoey's successful little counterattack, I split Storm blocks off from his squad with an assault team and moved them up to contest the Voyentorg. 2 of the team's riflemen are gunned down by unseen Germans in the smoke though, and Storm blocks has a rethink, falling back and ending up in Zab's house. He's not alone in there. Seeing the focus of Halloween's attack and how Zab's house is likely to play an important role in the next phase of the battle, I've shifted the rest of 3rd Platoon closer. The Flying Fish has moved into Zab's to back up Laronche's anti-tank rifle team and the remaining team of Nicholas McGoey's squad, while Dob 7343's platoon HQ and Grinch's squad have tightened up to positions on the other side of the street. This is no help to Mimir, who is trapped up on the top floor of the Voyentorg, blinded by all the smoke. A German scout team comes up the stairs looking for him, and they trade 1 for 1. As the smoke screen clears, fighting breaks out again. The remnants of Nicholas McGoey's squad in the front of Zab's are focused down by the German HMGs, losing a man and falling into a panic. The B team of Stormblock's squad, opposite the Voyentorg, come off worst in a firefight with multiple German teams across the street. They rapidly become pinned, start to panic, and, along with McGoey's B team, start trying to surrender. Both of these teams are lacking their squad leaders, and the platoon commander is out of sight and hearing. Left alone, they're obviously willing to take their chances with the Germans. The Flying Fish also goes down at this point, and as his squad takes increasing casualties, they drop out of control and become shaken too. The Ronch loses his number 2 while waiting patiently for one of the Panzer IVs to enter his field of fire, and while Halloween's first scouts crossing into Stormblock's old building from the Voyentorg are given a bloody nose by Grinch's squad, it's not exactly looking good on this flank. Things haven't improved on the right in the meantime either. The Panzer IVs are still parked outside Pavlov's, putting the hurt out. I've manoeuvred the T-34 a bit further forward to try and get some flanking shots in, but it resolutely refuses to spot anything. A distinctly optimistic attempt to rush the nearest Panzer IV with half of Kong's squad and close assault it through the smoke coincides with Halloween's decision to reverse it back, resulting in a minor disaster. Colonel Oddball and Unreal Assassin squad are both taking heavy casualties trying to cling on in Pavlov's and the workshops respectively. The only units actually under control near the objective are Salty Sea Snack's 1st Platoon HQ and Kong's SMG fire team back on Penninskaya. The situation isn't looking great, but it can't be looking good for Halloween either. It's always worth remembering in combat mission that the other guy is usually suffering just as badly. Halloween might have more men and more firepower to jam into this meat grinder, but he still has a finite amount of both, and every loss is a loss of capability. My options are actually staying pretty stable here. All I have to do is cling on. I still have both my reserve platoons to throw in, and I still have the capability to reinforce the objective building. Halloween is the one with the diminishing options and diminishing time of 3 avenues of approach. The oblique attack across the square has not only taken casualties but discovered a minefield at its destination. The attack up the centre via the chapel might have re-established a foothold, but looks to have stalled with high cost, and while the attack from the Voyentorg might seem set to clear me out over there, it still has a long way to go, and leads to what is a better support by fire position than an assault jumping off point. As so often in games of combat mission, the will to carry on is a crucial factor. Hanging in there for just one more turn than your opponent can often be the deciding factor. Naturally, this is no help to 3rd Platoon on the left, who rapidly crumble away under sustained German pressure. The Grinch is killed, and his squad takes heavy casualties, prompting Dob 7343 to drop into a shaken state as he joins them, trying to re-establish some control. The only member of 3rd Platoon still in the fight is Stormblocks and his lone remaining SMG soldier, but they've been exchanging fire with the German foothold in Pavlov's house, and it takes me a long time to realise that they're completely out of ammunition. I have sent 2nd Platoon to back them up though. I've been holding them in reserve back at the power plant, and now I'm moving them into the far side of the waterworks to engage Halloween's push from the Voyentorg corner. Petra von Weber and Oliver Croson's squads add their firepower to the party, backed up by their platoon leader Duda, whilst T.S. Birkby and its Shiki Time enter the right side of the complex to support the Binion OK-Nose Maxim as it fires on Pavlov's house. This is all able to hold Halloween at bay for a little while, and with the immobilised Panzer IV apparently too tucked away to spot, and the other more mobile enemy tank pulled further back, I shift 2nd Convex's T-34 back onto Tamborskaya to start picking off those HMG positions overlooking the square. After taking a couple out, I pull him back a bit more and concentrate on putting as much HE into the German foothold in Pavlov's as possible. On the left, meanwhile, the Grinch and Dob 7343 have had enough and are trying to surrender, but while some Germans have pushed into their building, the fire from Petra von Weber and Oliver Croson's squad, now joined by its Shiki Time, are stopping them from taking advantage. Halloween has, however, secured enough breathing space across the road from the Voyentorg to consider moving on Zab's house. He pulls back the mobile Panzer IV and redeploys it into the centre, past the chapel, while starting to run infantry across into Zab's. Laronche finally gets to use his PTRD, engaging the Panzer IV, but accomplishing absolutely nothing. The other anti-tank rifle teams were similarly ineffective. Over in the mill, both Dogi and Thang were taken out without ever firing at a tank, though in Thang's case he did at least attempt to make a more meaningful contribution by ditching his AT rifle for a scoped Mosin grabbed from the lifeless fingers of Jacob Parsley. The removal of the mobile tank from the right just leaves the immobilised Panzer IV to deal with over there, and I quickly seek to take advantage with 2nd Convex's T-34. Advancing up Tamborskaya, then hooking left onto the square and into a hull-down flanking position on the stationary Panzer IV, I'm hoping to not only knock it out, but, with a bit of luck, cause an ammunition cook-off that will obliterate Halloween's foothold in the objective, maybe even bring more of the building down on top of them. Going so far forward without infantry support in one of the blinder T-34s is certainly a risky move. 2nd Convex never spots the Panzer IV and proceeds to explode. The culprit is a German HQ team who have pulled off an incredible Panzerfaust shot that's very ahistorical for the Battle of Stalingrad, but we can't get rid of the Panzerfausts, and like I said, it was a risky move, and as such, somewhat deserved to be punished. It would have been much smarter to keep 2nd Convex alive, even as a kind of tanking being whose very existence was something that Halloween had to account for and worry about. Not to mention the potential for the T-34 to contribute significantly to the defence of the objective. This loss is another nail in the coffin for me, but I'm still committed to keeping going, and Halloween must be starting to run low on ammunition. Again, that's not much consolation for Colonel Oddball's squad in the objective. Oddball himself has acquired a DP-27 from somewhere, but goes down with the rest of his squad. Unreal Assassin's squad was wiped out by the Panzer Force earlier in the workshops, leaving the platoon leader Salty Sea Snack hiding in the back of Pavlov's house as the only survivor of his unit. I have more bodies though. It's time to start feeding my reserve SMG platoon in, starting with the Maritimes 99. Across the road in Zabs, Stormblocks, Laronche and the remnants of Nicholas McCoy's squad have all been mopped up. though I've moved TS Berkby's squad from 2nd Platoon up to somewhat successfully contest the capture of Dob 7343 and what's left of Grinch's squad. With some degree of stability achieved, obviously it's time for another counterattack. The mortars have some smoke left over, and I use this to put a screen down at the far end of Pavlov's before pushing up with the Maritimes. It takes them an agonisingly long time to stumble through the rubbled ruins, but they're relatively safe in the smoke and storm into the front of Pavlov's house, guns blazing. There are only a handful of Germans there and only one escapes, fleeing back towards the chapel. Pavlov's house is mine again, but the Maritimes has taken a few casualties in the process and gotten pinned by the experience of close quarter battle. Agonisingly, they go to ground in the ruins under fire from the adjacent immobilised Panzer IV instead of putting on their RO2 hats and close assaulting it. The whole squad is wiped out on the very next turn. The lone survivor attempts to surrender, but the German rifleman from the floor above, who evidently escaped notice in their assault, is not in the mood to take prisoners. We're clearly into the end game now. I'm pushing more bodies into Pavlov's, running Mr. Bass Games and Kong's squads over from the workshops, along with their platoon leader, Coffee Without Sugar, even as Halloween hooks his mobile Panzer IV round to work the cutoff. More German squads are moving into Zabs too, and while I'm able to catch some of them crossing the street with a hastily redeployed PS Berkby, I'm running on empty as we enter the final 10 minutes. I mean that literally. Most of 2nd Platoon is intact in the waterworks, but they're out of ammunition. Dominion OK No is firing off their last rounds, and the mortars are all dry as well. I can't reinforce Pavlov's with that Panzer IV covering the rear, and I don't have any means of getting rid of it. The SMG squads in the objective building at least seem to be spared 75mm high explosive shells. Both Panzer IVs seem to have run out and are reduced to armour-piercing rounds that might punch easily through Pavlov's and out the other side, but are considerably less effective. More Germans are streaming in across the square towards the chapel though, and as the smoke clears, Halloween's men across the road in Zabs can add their fire to that of the tank. Mr. Bass Games and Kong go down, along with most of their squads, and while Halloween shuffles his Panzer IV to get a better angle and allows me to rush Duck 121's final SMG squad across, it's pretty obvious what's going to happen to them in there. The Germans clearing Pavlov's house take some casualties, but this is more of a mopping up operation than a heroic last stand. Duck 121's mostly intact squad is pinned down and wiped out in short order. Salty Sea Snack, the 1st platoon leader who has somehow survived in the back of Pavlov's house for the entire game, goes down with barely a fight in the penultimate turn. With that, Halloween's Germans have secured Pavlov's house and a well-earned total victory. I've lost 100 men killed, 43 wounded and 14 missing, plus the T-34, in exchange for 53 Germans killed, 36 wounded, 1 Panzer IV knocked out, and another immobilised. The casualty list in detail then. Visceral history, the battalion commander lives to fight another day, as does the 1st Company HQ Wernerzusch, mostly by dint of being away from the fighting, doing HQ things. 1st Platoon was completely wiped out. Salty Sea Snack, Atakina, Colonel Oddball, Unreal Assassin, Imanikas, and Ivan Obelovich all perished in Pavlov's house or the workshops. 2nd Platoon, having spelt most of the battle out of trouble in reserve, lost its commander, Duda, and at some point its sniper team over on the left under Bengt III. So Petra von Weber, Oliver Crowson, T.S. Berkby and its Shiki time all survived. 3rd Platoon, holding the left, was considerably less lucky. The only survivor at the end is the platoon leader, Dob 7343, and he's only alive because he's trying to surrender. Mimir, the Flying Fish, Nicholas Magoe, Grinch and Stormblocks didn't make it. The supporting elements didn't get away either. Dominion OK No, the 1st Company Maxentine leader, was killed, and the Company Anti-Tank Rifle Platoon destroyed. That's Dumont, Fang, Laronche and Dogi. The mortars also suffered, losing the battery commander Pushisti in addition to Comrade Busterton and Hans Liebendorf at the very beginning. The 2nd Company elements, from their starting position in the mill, were almost totally annihilated. The company commander AWACS Ghost Eye was killed, along with RF 8640's Maxing team out on the right, and the entire SMG platoon was lost. That's Coffee Without Sugar with Hiking, Jacob Parsley, Kong, the Maritimes 99, Mr. Bass Games, and Duck 121. And, of course, 2nd Convex did not survive the detonation of his T-34. This was brutal, messy, and maybe a little closer than it looked. In Pavlov's house itself, or what's left of it, there are 65 bodies from both sides, not counting any that had disappeared after being buddy-aided. On the one hand, I was expecting a brutal, messy battle here, and I got one. But on the other, I made a lot of mistakes before we even started, and carried on making them once we got going. Focusing my force selection and planning on the concept of an infantry-dominated battle instead of factoring in anti-armor assets, and then failing to maintain a tanking being with the T-34 probably constitute the most damaging. But the main factor here was that Halloween came up with, and carried out, a solid plan. This was, interestingly, an infinitely better version of the eventual attack on Pavlov's that I conducted in Rattenkrieg. Halloween concentrated more fire, used more smoke, and was, as a result, able to repeatedly get to the objective building, relentlessly punish my defenders, and keep the pressure up until something in my defence broke. Even so, there are a lot of German casualties on the field, and Halloween's infantry platoons have been mostly shredded. There are no infantry squads in Pavlov's at the end. The final assault was conducted by 2 company HQ teams, a HMG team, a mortar platoon and section HQ team, and 2 mortar ammo bearer teams. Not the assault force I think anyone would choose out the gate, and an aspect of the game that shows how close it got, despite the final destination being pretty evident early on. So a huge thank you for Halloween for playing these 2 battles with me and giving me a good schooling. Again, another huge thank you for everyone who chose to adopt a pixel trepan this year, even if they didn't get in. Hope you all enjoyed these battles, and I'll catch you in the next video.